December 30th, 1903, Chicago's Iroquois Theater promised a night of holiday magic, but beneath its fireproof facade, a nightmare waited. One spark ignited a tragedy that claimed over 600 lives, leaving a city in ruins and a legacy of ghosts that still haunt the Windy City. Welcome to a true Chicago horror story, one that burns through time. Before we dive into this chilling tale, hit that subscribe button to join our journey into the shadows. Like if you're ready to uncover the paranormal, comment with your own spooky stories and share this video to spread the horror. Let's step into the past and face the ghosts of the Iroquois. On a bitter Chicago evening, December 30th, 1903, the Iroquois Theater buzzed with holiday cheer. Families, bundled in heavy coats, poured into the opulent venue for a matinee of Mr. Bluebeard, a musical comedy starring Eddie Foy. The theater, billed as absolutely fireproof, glowed with promise. Newly opened, its marble staircases and plush seats a beacon of sophistication. Over 1,900 souls, many women and children, filled the house, their laughter drowning out the winter wind howling down Randolph Street. Backstage, stage hands scurried, adjusting props under the glare of a newfangled arc light. It was Act Two when a spark caught a velvet curtain. At first, no one noticed the thin wisp of smoke curling upward. Then flames licked the scenery, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. Eddie Foy, mid-performance, saw the glow and shouted for calm, but the fire roared, fed by painted canvas and wooden sets. The audience, packed tight, sensed the shift from spectacle to horror. The Iroquois, despite its grandeur, was a death trap. Fire exits were hidden behind curtains, some chained shut to keep out gatecrashers. The main doors opened inward, useless against a panicked mob. As flames surged, people clawed toward exits only to find them locked or blocked. Women in long skirts stumbled, children screamed for their mothers, and the air thickened with choking smoke. A skylight meant as an escape was nailed shut. The orchestra played on, a futile lullaby against the growing inferno. In minutes, the theater became a furnace. Over 600 perished, crushed, burned, or suffocated. The alley behind, now called Death Alley, became a grim chute where bodies piled up, some still clutching tickets. Firefighters arrived too late, dragging out the living and the dead. Their boots, slipping in the snow, turned black with ash. The city mourned, but the scars ran deeper than grief. Today, the Nederlander Theater stands where the Iroquois once did, its stage lights bright but cold. Late at night, stagehands whisper of faint cries echoing from nowhere, of shadows flitting across empty seats. In Death Alley, passers-by feel unseen. Hands brush their shoulders or hear a child's sob carried on the wind. The dead, they say, never left, trapped in the moment the fire stole their breath. Their story etched into Chicago's bones. The flames had swallowed the Iroquois Theater in minutes, but for those trapped inside, time stretched into an eternity of terror. The holiday crowd, so full of joy moments before, now surged toward any hope of escape. Mothers gripped their children's hands only to lose them in the crush. Men shouted for order, their voices drowned by the roar of fire and the sickening crack of collapsing beams. The grand staircase, once a symbol of elegance, became a bottleneck where people fell, trampled underfoot by those desperate to breathe free air. Backstage, Eddie Foy, his face smeared with soot, stood frozen for a moment, watching the inferno devour the set. He'd tried to calm the crowd, his vaudeville instincts kicking in, but the fire was no heckler to charm away. He bolted for a side exit, barely making it out as the ceiling groaned above him. Outside, the Chicago winter bit at his skin, but the screams from inside burned hotter. He saw people leap from the balcony, some landing broken on the pavement, others caught in the blaze before they could jump. In Death Alley, the narrow passage behind the theater, the scene was apocalyptic. The few fire escapes that worked disgorged a flood of terrified souls, but the doors at the bottom were locked or jammed. People piled against them, clawing at the iron gates, their faces faces pressed to the bars like prisoners. Smoke poured out thick and black, choking those who'd escaped the flames only to suffocate in the cold. A young girl, her white dress singed, stood wailing for her mother, who never emerged. Firemen, arriving with ladders and hoses, wept as they pulled charred bodies from the pile, some still warm, others locked in a final embrace. By nightfall, the fire was out, but the city was gutted. Newsboys shouted grim headlines as families gathered at makeshift morgues, searching for loved ones among rows of shrouded figures. The Iroquois, fireproof no more, stood as a blackened husk, its gilded interior reduced to ash. Over 600 were gone. Teachers, shop clerks, children on Christmas break, each a story snuffed out. Chicago, tough as it was, reeled. Flags dropped to half-mast, and churches overflowed with mourners. The Nederlander Theater rose years later on the same cursed ground, its modern lights and polished floors a thin veil over the past. Actors swear the air grows heavy some nights, thick with the weight of unseen watchers. A janitor, mopping alone, heard a woman scream from the empty stage, only to find nothing but his own reflection in the dark. In Death Alley, delivery drivers avoid lingering, unnerved by whispers that seem to come from the walls themselves. A theater-goer once felt a small hand tug her coat, turning to see no one there. Just a faint giggle fading into the night. The ghosts of the Iroquois don't rest. They linger in the creak of the stage, the flicker of a house light, the cold spot in a dressing room. They're the echo of a city that failed them, a warning carried on Chicago's wind. Some wounds never heal, and some stories never end. The days after the Iroquois Theater fire draped Chicago in a pall of grief so heavy it seemed the city itself might never recover. By dawn on December 31st, 1903, the streets around Randolph and Dearborn were cordoned off, but crowds still gathered, staring at the smoldering ruins as if they could will back the lives lost. Horse-drawn ambulances clattered away, carrying the injured to hospitals overflowing with the burned and broken. Families wandered in a daze, some clutching photographs, others calling names into the freezing air, hoping against hope for a miracle that never came. The stench of smoke and charred wood clung to everything, a grim reminder of the holiday turned to horror. Inside the gutted theater, investigators picked through the wreckage, finding twisted iron, melted glass, and the remnants of lives. A child's shoe, a scorched program, a locket fused shut by heat. The fire's cause was pinned on that faulty arc light, but the real culprits were greed and negligence. The theater's owners had cut corners, ignoring fire codes to pack in more seats. Exits were decorative, not functional. Ushers, untrained, had fled or locked doors to control the crowd. The city's pride, its fireproof marvel, had betrayed its people in the worst way. Survivors carried scars deeper than burns. A schoolteacher, pulled from Death Alley, woke screaming for weeks, haunted by the faces of children she couldn't save. A father who'd lost his wife and son refused to leave the site, sitting in the snow until police gently led him away. Eddie Foy, the comedian who'd tried to hold the chaos at bay, never performed the same. His jokes forever shadowed by the memory of that day. Chicagoans whispered of curses, of a theater built too fast, too proud, tempting fate on cursed ground. The years rolled on, and the Iroquois was razed, replaced by the Nederlander Theater, a sleek monument to progress. But the past wouldn't stay buried. Stagehands tell of props moving on their own, curtains swaying with no breeze. A chorus girl, late at rehearsal, saw a woman in a tattered Edwardian gown standing in the wings, her eyes hollow, only to vanish when approached. Patrons in the balcony swear they've felt cold fingers graze their necks, heard soft sobs during quiet scenes. Death Alley, now just a service lane, hums with unease. Delivery workers report their trucks stalling, their radios spitting static that sounds like distant screams. A cop patrolling at midnight once saw a crowd of shadowy figures pressed against the alley's gate, gone when he blinked. The ghosts are restless, tied to the moment their world turned to ash. They're the The mother who shielded her child, the usher who locked the wrong door, the child who called for a parent never found. Chicago moves on. Skyscrapers rise, tourists flock, but the Iroquois fire lingers in its soul. Every creak in the Nederlander, every chill in Death Alley is a whisper of the 600 who never left. Their story a wound that bleeds through time, a horror that no curtain call can end. As the 20th century dawned brighter for Chicago, the shadow of the Iroquois fire refused to fade. Reforms swept in like a prairie wind. New fire codes, mandatory outward swinging doors, sprinkler systems in every theater. The city's skyline grew taller, its streets busier, but the Nederlander Theater, reborn from the ashes, carried the weight of its predecessor. Performers came and went, dazzling audiences with Broadway hits and star-studded shows, yet whispers persisted among the crew. The place was cursed, a stage where the living shared the spotlight with the dead. One crisp autumn evening in the 1950s, a young actress named Clara, fresh from New York, rehearsed alone under the house lights. The script was lighthearted, a comedy to chase away the post-war blues, but as she paced the boards, the temperature plummeted. Her breath fogged the air. Decades later, in the glow of the 1980s, paranormal investigators descended on the Nederlander, armed with tape recorders and EMF meters. They prowled Death Alley at midnight, the city's neon lights casting long shadows on the brick walls. A voice crackled through their devices, a child's plea, "Mama, it's hot," clear as a bell amid the static. One investigator felt a tug on his sleeve, turning to see nothing but felt the burn of invisible fingers. Their report made headlines in the Tribune, dubbing the site Chicago's most haunted, drawing thrill-seekers who braved the cold for a glimpse of the spectral. Even now, in the bustling 21st century, the ghosts stir. Tour guides lead groups through the theater's lobbies, recounting the tale with dramatic flair. But some visitors experience more than stories. A family from the suburbs catching a matinee heard footsteps racing overhead during intermission. No one was up there. In Death Alley, Uber drivers waiting for fares report their apps glitching, screens flickering with faces that aren't their passengers. A security guard patrolling after hours caught a whiff of smoke where none burned, followed by the silhouette of a woman fleeing down the lane, her dress trailing flames that left no scorch. The Iroquois dead are eternal witnesses, bound by tragedy to the heart of the windy city. They remind us in every unexplained chill and phantom cry that history isn't just pages in a book. It's alive, woven into the fabric of places we think we've tamed. Chicago thrives, resilient as ever, but on quiet nights when the loop empties and the river reflects the stars, listen closely. The fire still burns and its victims still call out, their horror story unfolding forever in the shadows. The Nederlander Theater pulsed with life under the glow of modern Chicago, its marquee blazing with the latest Broadway hits. Tourists snapped selfies out front, oblivious to the tragedy that stained the ground beneath their feet. But for those who worked the stage, grips, ushers, lighting techs, the Iroquois fire wasn't just history. It was a presence, a shadow that clung to the walls like smoke that never cleared. They swapped stories in hushed tones during late-night loadouts, tales of props shifting in locked rooms, of laughter turning to sobs in empty corridors. The theater, they said, had a memory longer than the city itself. One winter night in 2024, a stagehand named Marcus stayed late, rigging lights for a holiday revival of A Christmas Carol. The house was dark, save for the ghost light, a single bulb left burning on stage, an old theater superstition to appease restless spirits. Marcus, a South Side native who scoffed at ghost stories, worked alone, his tools clinking in the silence. Then he heard it, a soft tapping like footsteps circling the balcony. He called out, half joking, "Scrooge, that you?" No answer, just the creak of a seat folding down. His flashlight beam caught nothing but rows of empty velvet chairs, yet the air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ash. He climbed to the balcony, heart pounding despite his bravado. There, in the last row, sat a program for Mr. Bluebeard, its edges brittle and yellowed, dated December 30th, 1903. Marcus swore he'd never seen it before. Props were cataloged, and nothing that old belonged in the theater. As he reached for it, a child's giggle echoed from the stage below. He spun, dropping his flashlight, and saw a flicker of movement, a small figure in a white dress darting behind the curtain. By the time he scrambled down, the stage was empty, the program gone, but the ghost light flickered like it was caught in a draft. Marcus quit the next day, but the story spread, fueling the theater's legend. Across town in Death Alley, the hauntings grew bolder. A barista at a nearby coffee shop, locking up after midnight, saw a crowd of faces pressed against the alley's gate, pale, smudged with soot, gone in a blink. Delivery drivers avoided the lane altogether, their GPS glitching, their radios spitting fragments of old songs from 1903. Even skeptics felt it, a sudden chill, a whisper of "run" in their ear, a tug from hands that weren't there. The city tried to move on, paving over the past with glass towers and tourist traps. But the Iroquois dead held fast, their pain a pulse in Chicago's veins. They were the woman who shielded her son from the flames, only to lose him in the crush. The usher who locked the wrong door, dooming dozens. The child who wandered Death Alley, still calling for her mother. Their voices wove into the city's hum, faint but undeniable, a chorus of loss that no amount of time could silence. Every so often, a new story surfaces. A tourist feels a hand push them toward an exit during a crowded show. A janitor hears a piano play in a locked rehearsal room. In Death Alley, a dog walker's pup freezes, growling at empty air. Chicago, tough and glittering, carries on, but the Iroquois fire burns eternal in its underbelly. The Nederlanders' lights may shine, but they can't banish the shadows. The ghosts remain, their horror story a thread in the city's soul, whispering to anyone who pauses long enough to hear. Some fires never go out. The Nederlander Theater stood as a beacon of Chicago's resilience, its stage hosting laughter and applause night after night. Yet beneath the glitter of showbiz, the ghosts of the Iroquois fire stirred, restless as ever. By 2025, the city had grown louder, faster, its loop a maze of honking cabs and glowing screens. But the theater and its haunted alley remained a pocket of the past, where time seemed to snag like a needle on a scratched record. Those who lingered too long felt it, a prickle on the neck, a heaviness that made the air hard to breathe. One frigid January evening, a new usher named Lena, barely out of college, took the late shift. She'd heard the stories, everyone had, but chalked them up to overworked imaginations. The theater was quiet after a sold-out show, the last patrons trickling out into the neon-lit loop. Lena swept ticket stubs from the aisles, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous auditorium. Then, from the mezzanine, came a faint hum, a lullaby, soft and broken, sung in a voice too young for the sorrow it carried. She froze, her broom clattering to the floor. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the dark. The hum stopped, replaced by a rustle, like silk skirts brushing against seats. Lena's phone flashlight caught only shadows, but the temperature plunged, her breath clouding in the beam. She climbed to the mezzanine, heart hammering, and found a single seat, folded down. A child's hair ribbon, faded, singed at the edges, resting on the cushion. It wasn't there during the show. As she reached for it, the house lights flickered and a scream tore through the theater. Not hers, but a woman's, raw and desperate, coming from the stage. Lena bolted down the stairs, only to find the stage empty, the ghost light burning steady, its glow casting long, twisted shadows. She didn't tell her boss, but word got around. The ribbon was locked in a prop room, but by morning it was back in the mezzanine, now joined by a scorched locket. Crew members started refusing solo shifts, and even the toughest stagehands admitted to hearing things. Footsteps racing across the catwalk, whispers of "get out" during quiet moments. In Death Alley, the hauntings grew stranger. A street photographer snapping shots for a blog caught an image of a crowd in old-fashioned clothes, their faces blurred, standing in the alley at 3 a.m. The photo went viral on X, sparking debates about Photoshop, but the photographer swore he'd seen nothing through his lens. The ghosts were growing bolder, as if the city's rush to forget had stirred their anger. They were the father who'd carried his daughter toward an exit, only to find it chained. The seamstress who'd burned in the balcony, her screams unheard over the panic. The boy who'd slipped from his mother's grasp in Death Alley, family, lost forever in the smoke. Their pain seeped into the Nederlanders' walls, into the pavement of the alley, a wound that refused to heal. Chicago kept moving, new skyscrapers, new faces, but the Iroquois fire was a scar that pulsed beneath the surface. On quiet nights, when the Loop's chaos faded, the theaters seemed to hum with their presence. A janitor mopping the lobby saw his reflection ripple in the glass doors, replaced for a moment by a woman's face, her eyes pleading. A cab driver idling in the alley heard a knock on his window, only to find no one there. The city could build over its past, but it couldn't erase it. The ghosts of the Iroquois were woven into its bones, their horror story a warning etched in fire. Some tragedies cling tighter than time itself, and so the ghosts of the Iroquois theater linger in Chicago's heart, their cries echoing through time. The Nederlander stands proud, but its stage holds more than actors' dreams. It carries the weight of 600 souls trapped in a moment of fire and betrayal. In Death Alley, the air still burns with their stories, whispering to anyone who dares listen. Some tragedies never fade. They haunt us forever. Join us next time for another tale from the shadows. Subscribe and step into the unknown.